Before we get started here, let's get one thing straight. What is power creep? I asked this question to my YouTube community, and the general consensus was something along the lines of this definition I compiled from the results. The release of something new in a game that is objectively better in every way than something that came before it. This video will apply mostly to Fire Emblem Heroes, but will use examples from and should apply to other gacha games. Because at the end of the day, no matter how you feel about it, power creep is necessary for the continued support of a game. In the world we live in, all companies, businesses, and corporations have one goal: to make money. If they aren't making money on a certain venture, they have no reason to continue on with that venture. And this is especially true for games. Before the free-to-play era, all games would be released at a set price and they would just be done with it. There were no more ways for the company behind the game to make any more money from it, so they did nothing further with it. Now that in-game purchases can be utilized, however, companies have found that it can in fact be more profitable to release a game for free and charge extra for things. One of the most profitable games of all time, Fortnite, utilizes this technique and charges you for in-game cosmetic items. This idea then goes all the way to the modern gacha game, which charges you for in-game characters and items that completely change the gameplay experience. The thing about games with in-game purchases is that, unlike the static priced games of the past, they need to be continually updated. Updated with new content for everyone, yes, but especially new content for those who decide to pay. This is all to say that game companies only continuously update their games to turn a profit. If at any point the game stops making money, they have no reason to continue supporting it. So now the question arises: how do you ensure players spend enough money to continue to turn enough of a profit? Answering this question is simple. Let's take a look at some statistics as to where gacha game developers make their money. The source where I'm getting all this data from will be in the description. It says that in any given month, only 1.5% of active mobile game players make even a single purchase. About half of those players make only one purchase, and about 13% make 5 or more purchases. But the thing that really stands out about this 1.5% of people who make a purchase is that 10% of those single-handedly account for 50% of a game's entire revenue stream. That means that 0.15% of active players account for half of the money a gacha game makes. To put that into perspective, we can get an idea of how many active players Fire Emblem Heroes has by looking at this Reddit post from 2 years ago of someone getting a low rank in an event. It shows that there were 300,000 players above them at the end of the event, meaning the game had at the very least about 300,000 active players. We'll be generous and say that number hasn't dropped since then, and do our calculation. 0.15% of 300,000 is less than 500. Statistically speaking, 500 players account for half of Fire Emblem Heroes' monthly revenue. Granted, these numbers are only based on one study, so this is really a rough approximation, but the point stands. A very, very small minority of extreme spenders, or whales as you might call them, account for a significant portion of a game's earnings. In case you're wondering how this is even possible, let's take a deeper look. In nearly every gacha game on the market, the developers have a system in place that makes the theoretical maximum amount of money you could possibly spend on one thing absurdly high. In Fire Emblem Heroes, you could have one copy of a unit, which does fine, or you could have 11 copies of a unit, giving them a bunch of stats and making them score higher in certain modes. In a game like Genshin Impact, you can get one copy of a character, or you could get 7 copies of them and unlock the character's constellations, giving them new abilities and making them much stronger. Then you could even go ahead and get their 5-star weapon, which itself you need 5 copies of. This is where this crazy 0.15% number comes from. People with disposable income sitting around have so much stuff to spend on in this game that they just go ham. A game where the maximum spending limit is comparably low is Dragalia Lost. Let's check in and see how Dragalia Lost is Yeah, as far as I know, once you got one copy of a character in that game, there was no reason to spend any more money on them. But that's a topic for another day. So now that we know how developers get these players to spend a lot of money in one session, the question becomes this: how does a developer get these 500 lunatics to keep opening their wallets time and time again? The answer is, as I'm sure you guessed, power creep. I want you to imagine a gacha game where power creep doesn't exist. Meta characters that came out years ago are equally as viable now as they were then. The most glaring aspect of a game like this would be the fact that you never have a reason to pull for new characters. Think about it, if a day 1 character is better than or as good as literally every character to come after them, there would be no practical reason to have anything more than that character. Of course, you may like the design of a character or the way they play, but purely from a meta standpoint, the best characters you got the first day could carry you all the way through the game's lifespan. Think about a game like that and hold that thought. Now I want you to imagine a gacha game where power creep is extremely rampant. With literally every single update, the meta completely shifts in favor of the new characters, essentially rendering the old ones obsolete. Now think about both these games I just outlined for you, how you feel about them, which one you'd rather play, which one would be more successful, anything like that. From a financial standpoint, both of these games would be complete disasters. To find out why, let's go back to the main revenue source from these gacha games, whales. If I'm a whale in the anti-power creep game, I spend a ton of money on the first day of the game's launch, and I never need to spend another penny. From a practical standpoint, I'm set. This one character will be as good as everything to come after it, so why spend money on any of those? If I'm a whale in the rampant power creep game, I spend a ton of money on a character I like, only for a better version of that character to come out like a month later, and I'm like, what the hell, man, this game sucks, I just want to use the guy I just built, I'm out of here. And I never spend another penny because I quit the game out of frustration. Obviously, we need somewhat of a balance, and this is exactly what modern gacha games do. Power creep happens over long periods of time, and even when it does happen, it's rare for characters to become completely obsolete. Developers often implement methods of old characters to gain new effects through skills or weapons. These methods are, of course, monetized. They also want to make sure power creep isn't too intrusive, because if they pander too hard to the whales, they might lose the rest of the player base entirely, which would obviously affect the revenue greatly. The bottom line here is that if there's one thing whales like spending money on, it's powerful stuff that will stay powerful for a long time. This is plain to see. Take a look at this chart of the best-selling banners in Fire Emblem Heroes of 2021 from Reddit user FlareBlitz12. All the way at the top are the most meta-defining units of the year, and the summer units. I guess they like spending money on those too. Since whales make up half of a gacha game's revenue, it just makes sense for developers to pander to them by implementing power creep in the way that they do. So to put a nice little bow on everything, let's take a look at the life of a whale, as told through a storybook made by me. There once was a man named Violent. Violent is a middle-aged man with a low cost of living, a well-paying job, no kids, a competitive drive, and a love for hot anime babes. One day, he stumbles upon a game called Fire Emblem Heroes. "Wow," he exclaims, "this game has so many hot anime babes." He plays casually for a few months before watching a Fire Emblem Heroes tier list by his favorite YouTuber Connor Zach, who he is of course subscribed to. This look into the competitive nature of the game makes him want to get into the meta himself. But there's only one problem. Everyone at the top of the leaderboards has all these crazy invested units. There's no way Violent can hope to beat them without some of his own. Since he has the disposable income, Violent decides to go all in for the newest and bestest armored unit around, Ascended Fjorm, and gets her all the way to +10. He's immensely satisfied with his purchase. His Fjorm can tank pretty much anything. This continues for months as Violent collects shiny new units all at +10. Eventually, he has a go-to unit for every role his team may need, and all is well for Violent. That is until, his Fjorm just isn't cutting it anymore against these new offensive units. Violent sheds a single tear as his Fjorm dies to a duochrome for the umpteenth time, costing him the match. Eventually, a new unit is released, Duoduma. This unit fulfills the same role as Fjorm, but at this point does a considerably better job than she ever could. An average player may continue to use the Fjorm, but Violent wants to be the best of the best. "Well shit," he says aloud, "I'm hella loaded with cash, a couple G's couldn't hurt." And thus, thanks to power creep, Violent remains one of the 500 players, keeping the game afloat, allowing the other 299,500 of us to enjoy it as well. If a gacha game isn't making money, then there is no gacha game. It is therefore in a company's best interest to cater to the players paying the most money and slowly introduce power creep in the way that they do, so that they keep paying money and you can keep playing the game. Thanks for watching.